Thank you for your interest in learning how to prevent eviction and homelessness in Idaho. In this training, we will be talking about Jesse Tree's programs and client eligibility. And in the second part of this training, we will be talking about specific strategies that any member of the community can utilize to prevent eviction and homelessness. So to start out, Jesse Tree was founded in 1999 by concerned members of the community that were aspiring to curb homelessness in the Treasure Valley. Jesse Tree began receiving community block development grants in 2001 and emergency solutions grant funds soon after. Jesse Tree was predominantly volunteer run for about 15 years, where new leadership came in 2019. Ali Rabi became our executive director. And it was that same year that Jesse Tree became the lead prevention agency in City of Boise's campaign to end family homelessness. And we have seen rapid growth in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we went from being a 3-man operation to about a 20-man operation. That being said, we are still a pretty small organization, doing our best to help one family at a time to hopefully prevent them from experiencing the trauma of homelessness. So Jesse Tree's role in the greater continuum is specifically for targeted prevention and eviction prioritization. So we work with individuals that are currently in housing. They are on some kind of rental contract or lease agreement, and some type of financial setback has made it difficult for them to pay their rent, whether that is the loss of employment, reduced hours at work, a costly medical procedure, costly vehicle repairs. So we see a lot of different people in a lot of different situations. A lot of folks are living paycheck to paycheck and are truly just one costly expense away from experiencing the trauma of homelessness. So we work very closely with other agencies in the continuum, including Idaho Department of Health and Welfare's Navigation Services for households that have children in the home, as well as Our Path Home and Catch. So Jesse Tree has several programs. We have our Tenant Resource Center, which is kind of the front end of all of our programs. Our Tenant Resource Center is staffed by volunteers 40 hours a week that answer calls, texts, emails, and our lobby is available for walk-ins Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and we are by appointment only on Fridays. So the Tenant Resource Center is where you can direct folks that are needing to talk to someone about their situation, or they're not really sure what the eviction process looks like, they're not really sure what strategies they should try, and they're kind of just needing someone to talk through their situation with them. All of our Tenant Resource Center team members are very extensively trained, and we do regular cross training, and we are constantly trying to make sure that the information that is distributed on the Tenant Resource Center is national best practices and trauma-informed, solutions-oriented, and strengths-based strategies. Jesse Tree's Emergency Rent Assistance Program is what our organization has been doing since 1999. It is our bread and butter program. So that is the program in which individuals with a 3-day notice are applying for emergency rent assistance through. Next is our eviction court assistance programs. We do a lot of work with individuals that are going through the eviction court process to make sure that the agreements that they are signing are fiscally sustainable and that tenants understand what their rights are throughout this process. Full disclosure, Jesse Tree is not staffed by attorneys, so we are not giving any sort of legal representation or legal counsel. We are just providing support and advocacy. On that note, we do have a housing navigation program. So for the individuals that we support in eviction court, if a move out date is kind of the best case scenario for all the parties involved, we do have an opportunity to refer those folks to our internal housing navigators that at that point kind of help those individuals navigate new housing, whether that is moving in with a relative, applying for a new rental unit, or whatever situation is going to make the most sense for that person that has had to unfortunately leave their prior housing. And then lastly, we have our community health program, where individuals that are wanting additional support in navigating benefits such as, SNAP benefits, applying for Medicaid, applying for Social Security. Our community health team works with them a little bit longer to kind of help set them up for long-term success regarding their health and their housing. So Jesse Tree's Tenant Resource Center is the front end of all of Jesse Tree services. So everything starts with strengths-based diversion, where volunteers support callers or walk-ins by talking through their situation and helping them identify strategies and resources that they can try to rectify their housing insecurity, in addition to going through the process of being added to Jesse Tree's system. We are very forthcoming that Jesse Tree is not necessarily designed to be a Plan A rental assistance program. Jesse Tree is definitely a triaged emergency rent assistance program. We operate very similarly to an emergency room, which is why on the Tenant Resource Center, the goal is not to be a screening factory. We're not just adding people to our system to make them feel like they have more control. We are specifically focusing on supportive conversations to help tenants brainstorm strategies to avoid an eviction in the first place. Additionally, volunteers help callers and walk-ins understand the Idaho eviction process and what their options are. Volunteers do not provide any legal counsel or advice, but we do provide educational conversations about Idaho's expedited eviction process and resources for eviction-related concerns. If there are concerns about discrimination or being evicted out of retaliation, our volunteers would at that point refer tenants to the appropriate legal agency, because again, the Tenant Resource Center does not provide any legal counsel or advice. If a caller or walk-in needs a service that Jesse Tree does not offer, our volunteers help them identify the most appropriate resources and help them get in touch with that agency. So for example, if someone reaches out to the Tenant Resource Center specifically asking about utility assistance or mortgage assistance, rather than just ending the conversation there of, sorry, Jesse Tree doesn't do that, we will text information, we will email information, we will print out information for the people that come in person, and also provide any information that we've gotten directly from that agency. Jesse Tree does request trainings from other agencies throughout the year to make sure that the information that our staff are using is up to date and accurate. So we heavily encourage any other service providers to share any changes in their programs or services with us, whether that's through email or coming and doing an in-person training with our team, just so that we are getting the folks that are reaching out to the Tenant Resource Center the correct information the first time they reach out. Additionally, volunteers can go through Jesse Tree's web form with any callers or walk-ins who maybe are having difficulty submitting the web form on their own. This web form that is on Jesse Tree's website is specifically designed to only accept form submissions from tenants that have a 3-day notice or an eviction court summons. So for folks that have not received a 3-day and are trying to avoid getting a 3-day, a web form submission wouldn't necessarily make sense for their situation. So that is where the importance of strengths-based diversion and education and resource navigation comes in, which is why that's listed as our top 3 priorities on the Tenant Resource Center. And lastly, supportive conversations is what we use to kind of just wrap everything together. Volunteers employ strengths-based, solutions-oriented conversations to help tenants understand their situation fully and in a way that leaves them empowered. And Jesse Tree focuses on promoting resiliency above all else. We are not just here to be a form factory. We're also not necessarily an answer hotline. Every person's relationships and circumstances look different, so there's no way that Jesse Tree can necessarily have all of the answers, but by providing referrals to and information about community resources, educational conversations about Idaho's eviction process, and just general supportive services to help tenants brainstorm strategies to avoid eviction is how this particular program helps the people that are further upstream that haven't gotten to that emergent eviction point. So Jesse Tree can only provide emergency rent assistance if tenants are in any of the following situations. So they have to be renters in Ada or Canyon County. Ada County includes cities such as Boise, Meridian, Kuna, Eagle, Star, Garden City, and Hidden Springs. And Canyon County includes cities like Nampa, Notice, Caldwell, Wilder, Middleton, Greenleaf, Parma, and Melba. Have a past due balance or received a 3-day notice or an eviction court summons. So if a tenant has received a 3-day notice due to non-payment of rent, they would potentially get connected to our emergency rent assistance team. And if someone has received a 3-day and a court summons, then at that point that falls in our eviction court team's jurisdiction. Some very common questions that we get regarding our process is, when will I know if Jesse Tree is helping me? So if there are no case managers available within 3 weeks of submitting our web form, Jesse Tree will email tenants to let them know that they've been removed from our wait list. The email will include other programs and strategies that the tenant can try to utilize to prevent getting an eviction. How will a tenant know if they've been assigned to a case manager? So if a Jesse Tree case manager is assigned to a tenant, they will make multiple attempts to call the tenant, text the tenant, and email the tenant. So we definitely recommend all tenants that are inquiring about emergency rent assistance keep an eye on their email inbox and keep their voicemail box clear, or set it up if they have not set up their voicemail box already. And another question we get is, why does our process sometimes take so long? So Jesse Tree gets anywhere from 15 to 20 form submissions daily, and we have a small team of case managers trying to help as many people as possible. We're all doing our best together, and whenever possible, we will link arms with partner agencies, especially on more complex cases or in cases where the balance is extremely high, like several $1,000s. For most tenants, there is often more that needs to happen beyond just paying arrears. It is very uncommon that someone just, woke up one day and decided not to pay their rent. The vast majority of the time, it's that something has happened in a tenant's life that has made it so that they have fallen behind on paying their rent. So a lot of the time, in addition to getting caught up on their past due rent, tenants are also needing to address the thing that caused them to get in that situation in the first place, whether that was they were terminated at their current workplace and are looking for new work, or due to the nature of a workplace, someone's hours were drastically reduced and now they're having to look for secondary employment, or childcare fell through and that has thrown a pretty big wrench in a family's ability to work a full-time job, or a medical expense came up, or someone is waiting for their disability benefits to start coming in, and they know they're going to be retroactively receiving those benefits once they are approved, but they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place financially in the interim. So there's a lot of different types of reasons why someone would fall behind in their rent. Yes, paying the arrears is very important, but there's also that tackling the issue of what caused it in the first place that does need to happen as well. And additionally, it's never too late to try any of these steps to avoid getting eviction on a tenant's record. So step one being, talk to your landlord to tell them what you're trying and doing. We've gotten a lot of feedback from landlords that if they know their tenant is actively going out and doing things and their tenant is keeping them updated on what they're trying and what the results have been of what they've been trying, a lot of the time landlords are willing to hold off on filing for an eviction court hearing. So even if someone has received that 3-day notice to pay or vacate, the landlord may be receptive to giving the tenant more time before they file for eviction court. It's also really helpful for tenants to look at their budget to figure out what is the least and most they can afford to pay is. Some landlords are also willing to hold off on filing for eviction court if they are at least getting small payments throughout the month. And additionally, it's always good to reach out to friends and family for support, even if it's just babysitting or groceries. A lot of the time, people think that when we say reach out to family and friends, it's to ask their family and friends for money, when the reality is, if the kind of cause of someone's housing instability is because childcare keeps falling through, or they can't afford childcare anymore, maybe having your mother-in-law or your grandmother or a neighbor that you very deeply trust can watch your kids so that you can go and Uber, or so that you can utilize some of your other skill sets like mechanic work or landscaping to make additional money to kind of go toward those rental arrears. Even that in and of itself can be a huge help. Additionally, if you work, a 9 to 5 job and you know that you can't make it to a food bank, but you could really benefit from getting a food box, reaching out to your support network and saying, hey, is there any way that anybody can go and get a food box for me if I fill out a form so that they have my information? Those are all really great opportunities for people's personal relationships to provide them support beyond just monetary assistance. Additionally, it's also really good to find alternate ways to make income to pay down the past due balance, whether that's donating plasma, whether that is mowing your neighbor's lawn, whether that is shoveling snow in the winter. It really kind of depends on, do you have access to transportation? Do you have some free time maybe on your Sunday mornings or Saturday mornings or Friday evenings to kind of do Uber or things like that? So just kind of thinking outside the box on ways to make alternate income to kind of help get that rental balance as far down as you can. And the last thing is truly to just keep trying. We know this is sometimes the hardest part. It's very easy to feel defeated. It's very easy to feel like you don't have control. But most tenants don't realize how much true control of their situation than they actually have, and can sometimes benefit from being reminded of that. Everybody has more control of their situation than it might feel like they have in the moment. And what's really important is to just keep trying, keep doing what is within your power to do. And that kind of can-do attitude is usually something that Jesse Tree has seen landlords definitely appreciate. So Jesse Tree's program eligibility, the only two programs that really administer financial assistance are our emergency rent assistance program. The target demographic is, folks that owe rental arrears that have received a pay or quit notice, also known as a 3-day. And the services that we provide is landlord mediation, case management support, including budgeting help and connections to resources, as well as financial assistance. And in eviction court, that target demographic is folks that have been served a summons to appear in eviction court in Ada or Canyon County. And we offer pre-court mediation and or in-court mediation, depending on the county. And we provide aftercare case management as well as financial assistance. So Ada County and Canyon County's eviction court structures look a little bit differently. So Ada County, as of the filming of this video, has in-court mediation for eviction court proceedings, whereas Canyon County does not. For Canyon County individuals to benefit from mediation, they have to request a continuance for their case in order to be able to get mediation in Canyon County. Ada County has dedicated mediators that are very familiar with Jesse Tree's eviction court team, and so if you are not able to reach out to Jesse Tree prior to your court date, it is more than likely that Jesse Tree staff will be at the courthouse or will be available to get involved in mediation proceedings to help tenants better navigate conversations with their landlord and their landlord's attorney regarding realistic payment plans, helping the parties identify would it be more fiscally sustainable to move out, like with an extended move-out agreement? Would paying to stay be a better financial choice for all parties involved? By looking at the tenant's budget realistically and helping the landlord understand the pros and cons of letting a tenant stay versus evicting a tenant, we are actively trying to just help all parties involved reach a reasonable and sustainable compromise. So for Jesse Tree's emergency rent assistance program, this is what our client pathway can look like from first point of contact to check issued. So again, these are all clients that have received a 3-day pay or quit notice. So everything starts with the client being added to our system by completing the website screening form, calling or texting a TRC, or going to our office during lobby hours. The next step is that clients in Jesse Tree's system are put in a wait list, and from there they will either be assigned with a case manager within 20 days or be deactivated with a referral email. Once a tenant has been assigned from the wait list, the case manager would contact the tenant directly to work on a budget, create a housing stability plan, and support the tenant with rebuilding trust with their landlord. And at that point, case managers start to collect documentation necessary to administer financial assistance only once it's been confirmed that the tenant's financial setback is truly temporary and will not happen again in the near future. And once all the documents have been collected, Jesse Tree at that point mails the check to the landlord. So we understand all client situations are important. We understand how scary the eviction process can feel. Jesse Tree assigns cases like an emergency room. So the people that are facing the least amount of time before a legal eviction goes through are served first. And of those people, the folks who are experiencing more significant barriers, such as domestic violence, single income household with children, etc., are assigned to have access to needed supports. Additionally, thanks to an interpreter service, Jesse Tree can support clients in any language. For our eviction court assistance, the client pathway looks a little different. Again, this process only happens with tenants who have received an eviction court summons. So Jesse Tree's eviction court team provides outreach to clients in our CRM with upcoming hearings 2 weeks before their hearing by looking at the court docket every week. If a tenant has reached out to us and provided us with their case number and their hearing date and time, we at that point can add them to our system that way. So once a tenant is in our system and we have their contact information, Jesse Tree's eviction court team offers support on the day of court to help tenants negotiate pay to stay or extended move out agreements. And clients whom Jesse Tree's eviction court team assists in court are assigned to a case manager that day for aftercare or extended case management after their court date. And the case manager ensures the tenant follows through with whatever mediation agreement they signed in court and collects necessary documents to pay the tenant's past due rent balance. A lot of the time what we do is, for example, let's say someone owes $2,500 in rental arrears. We might have the tenant pay $100 toward their past due balance by, the Friday after their court hearing. And then if the tenant pays the $100, Jesse Tree can pay the remaining $2,400. The amount is very flexible. It's very case by case. But at that point, Jesse Tree would mail the check directly to the landlord and connect the tenant with any needed additional resources. So depending on the severity of the situation, Jesse Tree may switch steps 3 through 5 up to prevent a tenant from getting an eviction on their record. But there are certain things that do need to happen in order for financial assistance to be administered by Jesse Tree. One thing that we have started to do more recently is pre-court mediation. So mediation is a process where the tenant and the landlord meet with a neutral third party, being Jesse Tree, to assist them in finding the most realistic compromise for the tenant's past due rent. In eviction court on court day, tenants sometimes will agree to payment arrangements that they already know in that moment that they cannot realistically accommodate, like I can pay you $2,000 by tomorrow, when the reality is if you couldn't pay $2,000 today, what makes you think you can pay $2,000 tomorrow? Would a more sustainable solution being paying an extra $200 every paycheck or every Friday to give that tenant more of a opportunity to do alternate income generation, whether that's like doing Uber, donating plasma, babysitting, to kind of make that payment arrangement more realistic. So all tenants that apply receive an email confirmation message that they can forward to their landlord to show that they are taking steps to resolve their arrears. In that email, it is very transparent that just because someone applies for Jesse Tree assistance does not mean they are guaranteed financial assistance. Throughout all of our online resources, the web form, the email confirmation message, we are very transparent that applying to Jesse Tree is just one of many strategies that tenants should be trying to address their housing crisis. And this is Jesse Tree's program process, kind of more in a chronological order. So it starts with the Tenant Resource Center. Once someone submits a web form, they are added to our wait list. At that point, if they are assigned from our wait list, the case manager establishes first contact, whereupon they go through the case management process of looking at people's finances with them, connecting them to appropriate resources, creating a long-term housing stability plan. And then at that point, if it is appropriate, financial assistance is administered directly to the landlord. So every client that receives case management is getting connection to resources, financial literacy, landlord mediation, agency partnerships and collaborations, a supportive relationship, tenant and landlord rights and responsibilities discussions, and connections to jobs. Jesse Tree's process has a 92% success rate, meaning that the tenants that we provide with financial assistance and supportive services do not reappear in the homeless response system in the preceding 3 years. Most of the folks that we are helping stay in their housing long term. So Jesse Tree's biggest challenge is increasing demand. So Ada and Canyon County eviction court hearings have been pretty erratic since even before COVID-19, but since 2020 we've seen a 400% increase in inquiries for rent assistance, as well as calls and texts on the Tenant Resource Center. 125% more eviction court hearings, so landlords are filing more often than they did in 2019. So these are all challenges that, our community is facing, but Jesse Tree being a targeted prevention agency, we are definitely doing as much as we can to kind of help prevent as many evictions as possible, but we are a small team doing our absolute best. So now we're going to be talking about how you can help prevent eviction and homelessness in your community in Idaho. So first would be to go through our web form with the tenant if you know that they have received a 3-day or have received an eviction court summons, so that they can get added to our system as soon as possible. If you don't necessarily have time to go through our web form with the tenant during a time that you're going to be with them, you can also refer the tenant using our website referral form, just so that a member of the TRC team can do like a cold call to collect the information that we would need to add them to our system, like their contact info. Another opportunity is to have the tenant call or text us at 208-383-9486. Some people just prefer to talk to a human being over the phone. So our Tenant Resource Center is accessible Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. if they're calling. And again, our lobby is available for walk-ins Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Additionally, it's always helpful to go through the situation-specific resources listed on the Tenant Resource Center page with the tenants. So you can find that by going to www.jessetreeidaho.org/TRC for Tenant Resource Center. You can also email any specific questions that you have to office@jessetreeidaho.org. Sometimes if someone is in a especially kind of challenging legal situation, it may be better to just reach out to the Tenant Resource Center via email and provide some context about the situation. And if you provide the contact info of the tenant in question, a member of our TRC team can reach out to the tenant directly to give them the resources and information that they might benefit from. And lastly, learning the steps of Idaho's eviction process can definitely help tenants understand how much time they actually realistically have to improve their situation before they have to worry about getting an eviction on their record. So using Jesse Tree's Tenant Resource Center, again, that's www.jessetreeidaho.org/TRC, can provide case management strategies to support your clients with their housing insecurity. It provides literal step-by-step instructions on things that people can try. It includes free downloadable templates that tenants can use in their housing crisis, including payment plan templates. A lot of the time people like the concept of a payment plan, but they're not really sure how to lay that out or in what intervals they might be able to afford to make payments. So those free downloadable templates are really, really helpful in those kinds of situations. And there are also graphics that you can download and use on your website, on social media, text to people, or on materials that outline processes in a way that tenants facing an eviction can clearly understand. So all of our resources are categorized by situation. So if you were to click on the "I might not be able to pay rent" button on that page, it will take you only to strategies and resources that are relevant for that type of housing situation. Same with if you were to click "I need new housing," it would take you to a subpage that would specifically focus on strategies and resources relevant for that housing situation. So everything is just categorized by housing situation, but a lot of these subpages have a lot of very, very similar, if not the same information. So now we are going to be talking about the Idaho eviction process. So this process starts with a tenant not being able to pay their rent. So if a tenant cannot pay their rent, we highly recommend they talk to their landlord and ask for help, or even just asking for clarification about the late fee structure that was outlined in their lease when they originally started renting a unit. Jesse Tree's Tenant Resource Center page has strategies that tenants can try to avoid getting a 3-day in the first place. We encourage tenants not to wait, to be as proactive as they can and keep trying. There are people and organizations that can help them so that they can prevent the next step, which is the landlord giving notice. So if a tenant doesn't pay their rent on time, their landlord might give them a notice to either pay or leave. Usually you get at least 72 hours or 3 days to pay. If a tenant still doesn't pay after 3 days, the landlord can go to court to evict a tenant. So there are a lot of parameters that obviously need to be included on that 3-day. The pay or quit notice can have a lot of different names. There is no universal template or universal form that landlords in the state of Idaho have to use. So different landlords can use different looking 3-day notices, but it does have to include what the specific lease violation was, which in this case is non-payment of rent, as well as the balance owed, so that the tenant has an idea of what they are looking at in terms of a past due rent balance. So if 3 days have gone by and the tenant still has not paid their rental arrears, the landlord can at that point start the process to evict the tenant by filing for an eviction court hearing. Landlords are not required or mandated to file for eviction court. There are a lot of landlords that are willing to hold off on this step to give the tenant as much time as they financially can afford to. If tenants maintain really good communication and if the tenants are making, partial payments, landlords might be receptive to not filing for eviction court at all and just kind of being patient until that past due balance is paid in full. So the filing process is something that is a bit of a choice for landlords. A lot of the time we see that landlords are capable of being flexible, but we do understand that with large property management companies, it might be more difficult for them to offer their tenants flexibility, especially if they are based in another state. So if a landlord has to file or chooses to file, the court date will be set 5 to 10 days after they file, hence the expedited nature of Idaho's eviction process. So we definitely encourage tenants in those situations to talk to their landlord, ask for help, or pay as much of their rent as they can afford to, so that hopefully it can incentivize the landlord to not take the tenant to court in the first place. If the eviction court filing does go through, then the tenant will receive a letter called a summons in the mail telling them when their court date is. So attending the court date is required. If a tenant hasn't yet, we encourage them to contact Jesse Tree for assistance. Jesse Tree might be able to talk to the landlord pre-court to negotiate a deal to dismiss the case prior to the court date, depending on your landlord's willingness to work with another agency, or just kind of depending on the availability of our eviction court team. The next stage is eviction court happens. So remember that tenants need to go to their hearing following the instructions on the summons that they've received from the courthouse. If a tenant doesn't appear for their court date, they will get a default eviction judgment on their record. Mediation is available for eviction court hearings in Ada County, and a member of Jesse Tree's eviction court team may be able to support tenants even if they were not able to apply for Jesse Tree assistance prior to their court date, but we highly recommend that any tenants that you are working with that get a court summons, have them contact Jesse Tree prior to their court date to make it more likely that Jesse Tree will have the bandwidth to support them in the mediation process. So there are a lot of ways that you as an individual or as, a member of a different agency can provide problem-solving conversations. Definitely start by basing all discussions that you have with a tenant in kind of realistic solutions and making sure that you are talking about things from a sustainable framework. A lot of the time, when we are in a good mental headspace, it is very easy to be optimistic and to overpromise. So it is very important that when we are talking about things like payment arrangements, when we are talking about things like financial stability, that we are looking at things from a very realistic lens while also being strengths-based. Obviously, we are not wanting to make people feel discouraged or defeated. If they're in a really challenging or complex situation, they might already feel that way. So it's definitely important that we are making sure tenants understand what is at stake in regards to their housing instability. If they get a legal eviction on their record, making sure they understand how difficult it is to get into new rental units moving forward. So helping people understand the challenges of their situation, focusing on their strengths, and making sure that whatever solutions are discussed and proposed are ones that the tenant can realistically abide by and maintain moving forward. On that note, sometimes that does require you to think outside of the box. If you are working with an individual that has very specific challenges or barriers, then a lot of the solutions or strategies that you read about online, hear about on the radio or in podcasts might not necessarily apply to the person that you're trying to support. So definitely kind of putting your thinking cap on and trying to find solutions that are dynamic, that accommodate not only the challenges but also the tenant that you're working with's strengths, so that way it's not quite so tedious or not feeling so far-fetched that a tenant can't accomplish something, because if you are starting from a strengths-based foundation, then these creative solutions get a little bit easier to figure out during these realistic discussions. Additionally, you want to make sure that you are working with the tenant to discover available options or supports. So as an example, helping the tenant maximize whatever personal connections or relationships that they have. If they have very strained familial relationships, then reaching out to their friend group or whatever neighborhood communities they're part of. If they're part of any religious groups, tapping into whatever relationships or whatever social networks that they have access to find creative, supportive opportunities for the people in that tenant's life, whether that is support with babysitting and childcare, whether that is opportunities for community meals if someone is really struggling with affording groceries, if someone is specifically looking for employment opportunities, reaching out to their friends, reaching out to neighbors on, hey, I'm looking for work. This is kind of, what my parameters are. Do you know of anyone that's hiring? And just also kind of maximizing the people in their lives for references. Like, hey, I'm looking for new work. Is it okay if I list you as a reference on this application with this company, to give that person, the opportunity to kind of also help support that tenant during that really stressful time. And lastly, you definitely want to make sure that throughout these problem-solving conversations that you are listening first and foremost, and you're validating experiences. And that is something that you do all throughout these steps. These steps are not necessarily in chronological order, but you definitely want to make sure that you are using your active listening skills and you are retaining the information you're hearing and you are acknowledging when things are hard. You definitely are not wanting people to walk away from these problem-solving conversations feeling like they have been talked down to, like they have been infantilized just because life is really hard for them right now. We are definitely wanting to not only be realistic and supportive, but also just empowering. We want people to walk away from these conversations feeling empowered and confident that they will be able to improve their housing crisis with information and strategies and resources moving forward. So here are some examples of strengths-based questions that you can ask tenants that you know are going through kind of a rough spot. So asking that general question of who are your friends and family members? What have you done to be able to avoid eviction in the past? If you're talking with someone who maybe has gone through this situation before, asking that question can kind of remind them like, well, it's been a few years since I've been through the eviction process, but this is what I did in the past, and so I guess I could try that again. If you're talking to a first-time renter that has never been in that situation before, then discussing their ideas, if they've already had any, about alternate solutions and expectations for each alternative. So consider whether the options are safe and appropriate. Definitely work with that person to reality test options with open-ended, non-judgmental questions. So if someone brings up the idea, well, I guess I can Uber on the weekends, asking that follow-up question of what do you think the timeline would be to pay your arrears by doing that task? Or are there any options you can think of or consider based on, if someone likes the idea of donating plasma for money and then they go to the clinic and it turns out, oh, I cannot donate plasma for XYZ reasons, then having a follow-up conversation of, okay, we've tried that, it didn't work, so what are other things that we can try instead? By kind of coming up with a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, it can kind of reduce the amount of follow-up conversations that may need to happen, but also just asking that general question of what do you think you'll need to do to make that strategy happen? So to go back to the Uber example, what are the requirements of Uber drivers? What are the requirements that you would need to do in order to babysit? Or what would you need to do in order to donate plasma? Also, asking that question of do you want to talk about a backup plan? Having a plan A, a plan B, a plan C is very, very helpful, especially if you're talking to people that are just in really complicated situations. You can also help mediate conversations. So mediation involves the intervention of a third person or mediator into a dispute to assist the parties in negotiating jointly acceptable resolution of issues in conflict. The mediator meets with the parties at a neutral location where the parties can discuss the dispute and explore a variety of solutions. So why is mediation important? Mediation allows for alternative options to eviction. So if you are talking to a tenant and they are telling you that their landlord feels like they've been ghosting them and, there's a lot of hurt feelings and trust has been broken, then now helping that person navigate that already emotionally charged conversation can be really beneficial to kind of get both parties on the same page, identify and have that accountability conversation of, hey, I feel really bad that I was avoiding your calls and texts. I was just really stressed out. I was having to work more hours to try to pay toward my arrears. I really appreciate your patience with me. Here is what I plan to do moving forward. So a lot of the time, by providing alternate options such as payment arrangements or just kind of updating the landlord on whatever strategies and options have been explored, can be really, really beneficial in helping the landlord understand where the tenant is coming from. Also, helping the tenants see the impact of eviction and landlords see the benefits of mediating an agreement. So once a tenant has an eviction on their record, it stays on their record. Additionally, landlords are facing a lot of costs involved in eviction process. Landlords have to pay to file for an eviction court hearing. Landlords have to pay for an attorney for that interaction. If a tenant is evicted, a tenant has to pay to have the unit cleaned. That comes out of the security deposit. A landlord has to sometimes pay to list their available units on certain web platforms, and then they have to pay for background checks for new potential tenants. And then, so there's a lot of costs affiliated with rental unit turnover for landlords, and it is often more cost effective to keep the current tenant in the unit and just help the relationship kind of get back on a civil and productive track. Additionally, Mediation gives the opportunity for attitude adjustments, empathy, and cooperation. Sometimes a party might not be approaching the situation from a realistic standpoint, or if there are really hurt feelings, then that can lead to challenges in kind of navigating productive conversations. So mediation, by bringing kind of a neutral third party in, can kind of help people identify, hey, I acknowledge that I feel this way because of ABC behavior, but I am still receptive to having you in this rental unit, or I'm still receptive to having you as a landlord if certain conditions are met, and then negotiating those conditions. Additionally, it does not feel good to know that you are responsible for someone being homeless. So creating opportunities for empathy, for that human-to-human connection, and also fostering kind of that sense of cooperation of like, hey, this situation is uncomfortable, neither of us like it. What are ways that we can support each other through this process so that you are not homeless and so that I am getting what I need in order to maintain this rental unit? So mediation tactics, of course, involve problem-solving skills, so appealing to the landlord or tenant's humanity when you are looking at finances, to kind of lose sight of the fact that, this is a human being on the other side of these number signs. So definitely giving opportunities for people to demonstrate their humanity. Appealing to the financial loss and gain is something we see a lot of success with in eviction court. It's kind of like a pros and cons list if you look at costs and profits with landlords in regards to the costs of evicting a tenant versus the costs of giving that tenant a little bit more time, with the understanding that programs like Jesse Tree might be able to financially contribute toward that arrearages. Also appeal to the sense of long-term over short-term. So the short-term cost of filing, or the short-term loss of profits of a payment arrangement, versus the long-term cost of turning over a rental unit to basically rent to a different tenant, and so on and so forth. Also asking directive questions is something we see a lot of success with in eviction court. Regarding negotiation tactics, so if the tenant can pay let's say $50 or $500 or $700, would you as the landlord be willing to waive late fees or allow for extended time on the move out? So instead of making them move out in 3 days, are you willing to wait 3 weeks? Are you willing to dismiss legal fees? Are you willing to negotiate a longer or more reasonable payment plan for the tenant? By using this tactic, it definitely can make certain solutions a little bit more sustainable for tenants, especially if the tenant that you're working with is like between jobs or is waiting for benefits to come through. Additionally, asking, are you willing to So offer suggestions for alternative options, offer payment plan ideas with the knowledge of the tenant's capabilities. Some landlords are receptive to work trades, some are not. Some landlords are receptive to waiving fees, some are not. Some landlords have a very rigid corporate structure, and others are a lot more flexible because they're an independent landlord. So these negotiation tactics obviously are going to work differently on different types of landlords, whether it's an independent landlord or kind of a bigger corporate structure. But providing the opportunity for these tactics, for these conversations, is really important to have. Some examples of questions in mediation can be, what is the reality of your financial situation? So if you are talking to someone you haven't really had an opportunity to ask, like, hey, what does your budget look like? Asking this question first and foremost is very helpful so that you are not wasting time on talking about a payment plan that is like, you have to pay me $2,000 by tomorrow. And it's like, I have $2 in my bank account and I can't do that. So asking out of the gate, what is the reality of your financial situation, can definitely be a good start to the conversation to make sure that the proposed solutions after that point are realistic to what the tenant can accommodate. Does the tenant know what they're agreeing to? So is it financially possible for them to follow through with the agreement? What is their plan moving forward? Additionally, does the tenant understand the consequences of the agreement if it is not upheld? So if a tenant agrees to pay $50 tomorrow and $500 on Friday, Do they understand that if they miss the $50 payment tomorrow, they get an immediate default eviction judgment? So making sure that tenants and landlords both understand what is at stake. Jesse Tree does have payment plans available on our website. By using our templates, you can definitely help tenants come up with an agreement. A lot of the time, if landlords and tenants see this kind of broken out in detail with like specific monetary amounts and dates, it definitely helps them feel a little bit more confident that this is a problem that is solvable, that a solution is possible. So thank you so much for your time and dedication to preventing eviction and homelessness in Idaho. The more of our community members and our neighbors that we can prevent from experiencing the trauma of homelessness, the better our community will become. Let's keep the Treasure Valley special and chart a new path to prevent homelessness from happening to people and our community in the first place.